The Jets host the Miami Dolphins in Week 18 action. For Miami, it's a huge game. For the Jets, well, the best thing I can say is the season's about to end. Let's discuss today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, January 3rd, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to you every day, as this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, my friends, the end is finally near. The New York Jets play their season finale Sunday against the Miami Dolphins. Kickoff time is scheduled for 4:25 Eastern from MetLife Stadium. The game will be shown on Fox. This is the moment I think Jets fans have been waiting for at least a couple of months. This was a season that began with such anticipation. I think Jets fans spent the entire offseason excited about this team. Aaron Rodgers returning from an injury, and as we know, things have not gone well, and that's an understatement. This Jets team is 4-12, and the thing about this Jets team is there's really nothing redeeming about it. There are lost seasons where you feel like you're building to something bigger. There are seasons where maybe you don't play well, but you have young players who step up. There are lost seasons where maybe you get a high draft pick. Maybe you're focused on landing that quarterback with a high pick that can change your franchise. There are seasons where you lose with a purpose. This is like the ultimate opposite of that. This team was, the operative phrase all offseason was all in for this team. And, sometimes when you go all in, you win the jackpot. Unfortunately for the Jets, sometimes when you go all in, you lose everything. You lose the house. You lose your savings. The Jets have lost everything. And I think that's one of the things that makes this a difficult season to deal with, is that this is not building to anything greater in the future. And I think everybody knew at the time the Jets were trading for Rodgers. I think, at least if you were being honest with yourself, that the Rodgers move was an extremely short-term move. It was all about maybe 1-2 outside chance of 3 years where you're trying to make a run, but that the team at the end of this era would find itself in a difficult spot. The hope was that the Jets would have enough success in this short run to make that difficult turnaround that would come in 2025 or 2026 not so painful. Well, it's going to be painful, and maybe the most painful part is how much this has failed. And I think the other thing that really makes this a difficult season to watch is just the way the team has responded, or maybe the better way to put it is how the team has not responded. This is a veteran team. This team has a lot of big names, and they have this team, which you would expect to compete on a weekly basis, simply has not done so. And the guy who really sticks out to me, he's not the most prominent player on the team, but the player who probably embodies the 2024 Jets more than anybody is Hasson Reddick. Because when the Jets traded for him in the offseason, there were such high expectations. He was a guy who came in with so much hype. Guy who had been one of the NFL's top pass rushers in the previous 4 seasons. And it's not just that Hasson Reddick is disappointed, it's that he's done nothing. He's added literally nothing. When we talk about worst moves in franchise history, I mean, there are lots of factors involved. It's like, how much did you pay for a guy? What were the expectations? There's lots of different things that come into play. When we talk about least bang for your buck, when you talk about what the Jets gave up, a 3rd-round pick, what they were expecting from him, an elite pass rusher, and what you got from him, which was, first of all, a distracting holdout, no production. And if you're watching the film or you're watching the team on a weekly basis, you see very little effort from time to time. And that's kind of emblematic of this team. I mean, I think that after 3 games this year, I've questioned this team's efforts. That's not something you should do on a consistent basis, but I've done it 3 times this year, and I don't think it's been unfair. I think like anything bad you can say about a team, you could say about the 2024 Jets. This isn't just a team that disappointed. This is the type of team you write books about, because this is a type of team that will live in infamy forever. I think the one of the most recent famous examples of a team with high expectations that fell flat, a team with a lot of hype, was the 2011 Eagles. But they at least had moments in that season where they looked like the dominant team. The Eagles made a bunch of flashy moves that offseason. They brought in Nnamdi Asomugha, elite corner from the Raiders. They made a lot of other big ticket moves. And their backup quarterback, Vince Young, declared them the dream team heading into that season. And they disappointed, but they were at least hovering around 500. They at least had some games where they looked great, one of which came against the Jets. This Jets team, I mean, when have they looked great? The high point of this Jets season was week 3 when they beat a New England team that's going to pick at the top of the NFL draft. That was maybe the one moment where everything came together. And at the time I thought, okay, well, this team's coming together. But looking back on it, I think the skeptics, the people who said, well, they only beat New England, were right about that. So there's not a lot on the line. I mean, I know draft positioning is on the line. The Jets could pick anywhere between 2 and 9 in the NFL draft. We discussed that a little bit earlier in the week when we did our mailbag show on Wednesday. But if the Jets win this game, this isn't the type of win that builds towards anything. Jets lose this game, I guess it impacts the draft positioning, but there's not really much to be gained or lost. I think in many ways, this game's just a question of pride. How bad do the Jets want to continue playing? I think one thing we know is that Aaron Rodgers, one touchdown pass away from 500 in his career. I think he wants to get that touchdown. I think he wants to throw it to Devante Adams. I mean, I think if we get into the red zone on Sunday, odds are good that Devante Adams is seeing the lion's share of the target so that Rodgers can throw 500 to Adams. But aside from that, look, we saw in week 17 a Jets team that did not compete at a high level in Buffalo. And part of it's just the team's not that good. Part of it's that the team is poorly coached. We know all of that. But I think in many ways the effort was lacking in that game. And heading into that game last Friday when I did my preview show, I said, this has the potential to be a U-Haul game. And that's the expression that's used in the NFL the last 2 weeks of the season, especially when it's been a lost season. It's been a long year. A lot of players don't live in the city where they play, so they pack up the U-Haul and they drive it out of town once the season ends. The U-Haul's already loaded up, and you're not even focused on the game. Is that what it's going to be like for the Jets in this game? There is an opportunity to win. Look, this is a Miami team that's got a lot of pressure on. This is a game that could put the Dolphins in the playoffs if they get some help on Sunday, and that brings pressure. And we've seen this a lot through the years in the NFL that Week 18, when that pressure starts to kick in, when your season's on the line, that can lead to some weird results. And the Dolphins could be playing with their backup quarterback, Tyler Huntley. So perhaps there's an opportunity for the Jets to win and at least end this season on a positive note. But you can't guarantee it because, I mean, we've seen how this Jets team has played all year. We've seen how they've responded. And beyond that, I mean, 2 years ago, the Dolphins were playing with their third-string quarterback, Skylar Thompson, the final game of the season against the Jets. And they won, and they made the playoffs. So even if Tyler Huntley does start for Miami this week, and he got the bulk of the practice reps, there's no guarantee that the Jets are going to win this game. I think in many ways it comes down to how bad do the Jets want to go out there and compete? How hard do they want to play? Is this a team that has any sort of pride? And all that's on the line, really, I mean, outside of the obvious stuff like draft positioning, is do the fans who watch this game, those of us who are foolish enough to watch this team one more time, do we at least get some entertaining football? Because that's been a rarity this season. We have not gotten a lot of entertaining football. Can the Jets at least give us that, like 3 hours where they look like a competent professional football team? There have been a few moments where it's happened this year, but it's been very fleeting. Can we at least have like one last game at the end, maybe one okay memory in a season that will be remembered poorly? Well, that's on the line. That's really up to the Jets, because the Jets compete in this game. They got a shot at winning. They took Miami to overtime the first time these teams met, and they should have won that game. So we'll see what the Jets want to do. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, well, let's continue talking about this bad season. I think that there are some lessons that we can learn in early retrospective on the 2024 Jets and what we can take from this lost season. That's as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of the final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats, like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, for a shot up to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Again, download the app today and use code Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL, one word with no space, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's part of your life you want to rewrite or a plot twist you've been craving, why wait? Life is not about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping to craft the life you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Whether it's learning how to set boundaries or tackling stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Even if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you every dayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And I have to say thank you so much to everybody who's listened and watched through the year. This has obviously not been an easy season to endure as a Jets fan, and maybe we've helped each other get through it. It's been, a season nobody hoped for, but it's been the season we've gotten. And there will be plenty of time, plenty of words spoken, plenty of words written in retrospectives on the 2024 Jets. As I mentioned in the first segment, I mean, this is going to be a team that will be remembered and analyzed for a long time to come for all the wrong reasons. And there are very few redeeming aspects of this season. Really, very few things come to the top of the mind. And we're going to spend a lot of time dissecting what went wrong with this team in the weeks and months ahead. I'm sure we won't be the only ones. But I think this is the time to start and look at why things went wrong. And I think there's one big lesson that can be taken from this 2024 New York Jets season. And you could even push it back to the 2023 season. And it's simply that there is no shortcut to success in the NFL. And when I look at the way this 2024 Jets team was constructed, and again, I think you can even go back to 2023, I see a lot of shortcuts taken, or maybe more accurate to put it in that the Jets are always seeking like the one magical fix. The Jets always think that they're one move away. And it's very rare in the NFL that you're one move away. There are other sports where one move makes a big difference. In the NBA, professional basketball, only 5 guys on the court at a time, and guys play both ways. Guys plays offense and defense. So one player, you get LeBron James, you fill him you put a half decent roster around him. You got a team that can win a lot of games. It's less true in the NHL. You have 5 guys on the ice at any given moment. You have a goalie. You have 20 players on your roster. But it's more true. There's still not that many players. There aren't that many pieces you need to fill in. In baseball, it's even less true. You have 10 players at any given point. If you count the DH, you have a pitcher and a DH, and then 8 fielders who hit and field. You have a 5-man rotation. It's less true, but it's still. The one player still makes a bigger difference in baseball than they do in football. In the NFL, you have a 53-man roster. You have a big coaching staff, big front office, big staff, and you have 22 players. You have 22 starters. You have role players to fill in. One person makes less difference in the NFL in football than any other league or sport, even at the quarterback position. And when I think about the moves the Jets have made the last 2 years, and especially within this season, it's like they've thought that you can just get one guy and that fixes everything. Now, that was true when the Jets traded for Aaron Rodgers in 2023. Obviously, the Jets thought that they had the makings of a Super Bowl team. And as we now know, that simply wasn't true. And I see people say, well, it was worth taking a shot to try and be great. That's the type of thing you say if your team was actually good. that's the type of thing you say if like you had a team that could make a deep playoff run. Like if you were the 1 seed and you got knocked off, you got surprised in the divisional round, or you lose in overtime in the AFC Championship game, or you fall a little short in the Super Bowl, then okay, fine. The Jets didn't like take a chance to be great. The Jets misread the situation, and they thought they only needed a quarterback to be great. The Jets had the makings of a good team. They had a team that was making progress. They had gone from 2 wins in 2020 to 4 wins in 2021 to 7 wins in 2022. Now, 2022 had a terrible finish. Jets went from 7-4 to 7-10. They lost their last 6 games. Awful finish. But they were making progress. And unfortunately, the Jets took the beginning stages of progress where they had that outstanding draft class in 2022 and thought all they needed to do was add a quarterback, and they were set. And you've seen this over and over again this season. You've seen this with when they fired Robert Saleh. I mean, at the time, people were saying, not everybody, but people were saying, all we need is a coach. We just change this coach and we'll be fine. It's worth a shot. Worth a shot to try and save the season. Well, it didn't save the season. It made things worse. When the Jets traded for Devante Adams, same thing. We did this will change everything. We're all in. We got to go for it. One move. Well, it didn't work out. Even to a lesser extent, Hasson Reddick, our friend, our guy who is the embodiment of the spirit of the 2024 Jets. That happened shortly after the Adams trade, a few days later. The Jets fooled themselves into thinking that they were a player away. They fooled themselves into thinking they were a move away multiple times. I mean, all of these moves, the Jets seemed to think like every single one of these moves would save their season, and it didn't. And this goes hand in hand with another thing that I think has been an issue for the Jets franchise. It's something that's got to change if this team's ever to get out of this cycle of losing. And the Jets need to make honest assessments about where they are as a franchise. That's something the Jets have struggled with for years. It doesn't matter who the GM is. It doesn't matter who the coach is. It doesn't matter who the players are. Of course, there's only been one owner group during this whole time, the Johnson brothers. But the Jets, I think if you're looking back at this after 2022, the Jets did not honestly assess where they were as a franchise. And I think, again, after last year, the Jets did not honestly assess where they were as a franchise. I think the Jets always take the interpretation that's most convenient to them. After last season, I think the Jets said, we won 7 games without Aaron Rodgers. Think about how good we'll be with him. Well, first of all, that wasn't honest. It wasn't an honest assessment about where Aaron Rodgers was as a player. Because while there was certainly hope and reason to be hopeful that Rodgers could bounce back and Rodgers could be an effective quarterback, there also had to be an acknowledgement that he was 39 years old. He was turning 40 in the season, and he was coming off a serious injury, and he had shown signs of decline in his final season in Green Bay. These were all danger points. And, we could go back to 2022 when the Jets traded for him. Again, the Jets weren't honest with their assessment. They had a team that had won 7 games, but a team that, had finished the season poorly, and a team that had the beginning of a foundation, but wasn't all the way built. In 2023, they won 7 games, but they won 2 of their last 3 against bottom 3 teams in the league. And a lot of their early season wins were kind of fluky things happened in them. The 2023 Jets were quite a bad team. They were a team that was far away from the Super Bowl. They were a team that was not a quarterback away. And within this season, thinking that Jeff Ulbrich was going to save everything. Nobody knew how bad Jeff Ulbrich would be, but it was pretty clear at the time he was being thrown into a really tough spot. This guy who had never been a head coach before, thrown in, tried to save this turbulent season in this crazy city with all these high profile players, these big egos. It was a lot to ask to think Jeff Ulbrich was going to turn the season around. And the idea that the Jets were a receiver away trading for Devante Adams at 2-4, that was going to change everything, that was very faulty thinking. So there are lessons to be learned. There are going to be more lessons we'll discuss, but I think that any assessment of where things went wrong with the season begins with those points. And we'll see what the Jets do with those points, because the Jets have not shown themselves to be great learners in the past. Maybe something this bad will finally make something click when they think about how they build their team going forward. After on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about how they build that team going forward. Some Jets fans are a little distressed by seeing the candidates the team has interviewed for general manager and head coach. Well, it's a little early to be distressed. I'll explain why. And I'll explain why you'll start to see some of the bigger candidates interviewed for these jobs as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here. Obviously, the Jets won't be in them, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up the W. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Jets on home underdogs against Miami this weekend. Even though Miami's quarterback situation is unclear, the Dolphins are still favored. Tough to argue with that assessment. So, I mean, it's tough to pick the Jets right now. But again, there are other ways to bet. Which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. I mean, do you think Aaron Rodgers is really going to target Devante Adams in the red zone for 500? FanDuel might be the place to get in on the action. Of course, Adams didn't score a touchdown last week, so who knows? But that's where FanDuel is. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. Jets season ends Sunday, and this is not a season fans are going to miss. I think this is football fans love football season. Even when your team is bad, you're usually a little sad when the season ends because you don't get to see your team for like 9 months. I don't think Jets fans are in that mindset right now. I think even the biggest diehard Jets fan is happy they're going to get a little break from this team. Maybe 9 months before we have to see this team again. A little separation might do us some good. But when the Jets take the field in September of 2025, they will have a new head coach and a new general manager. And if you've been following, interviews have begun. And the Jets have interviewed a number of candidates for their general manager job. Former Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitroff, former Titans general manager John Robinson, ESPN analyst Louis Reddick. And then on the head coaching side, the first interview got announced this week, former Commanders and Panthers head coach Ron Rivera. And then maybe Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan said he's expecting to talk with the team, which did not exactly sound like he has an interview confirmed. I mean, it sounded like maybe he does, or maybe he's just trying to throw his hat in the ring. Maybe he said like I'm expecting to speak with the team. So is he going to call Woody Johnson up and say hire me, or is there like an interview scheduled? We don't know. One thing I do know though is that a lot of fans are very frustrated and distressed with the candidates who are interviewing for the jobs, and I think that any frustration over the candidates so far is misplaced, and it's not really about the caliber of the candidates. Although I think that for the most part, these are reasonable candidates who are interviewing for the jobs. Robinson, I thought that did a pretty decent job in his tenure in Tennessee. I thought Dimitroff did a decent job during his tenure in Atlanta. Louis Riddick, I think make some interesting points. Ron Rivera, I mean, not a great coach. I don't think there's anything wrong with interviewing him though. But I think the bigger point is there's no top tier of candidates right now. And the reason the Jets interviewed these specific candidates is clear. These are the only candidates the Jets can interview until the season ends, because the NFL does not allow you to interview candidates who are currently employed by other teams until the end of the regular season. Now, if you're interviewing an assistant coach on a playoff team, a team that's still participating in the NFL playoffs, there are all these sorts of other regulations which seem to change from year to year. So the Jets will have to deal with those. But just because the Jets are interviewing Ron Rivera first, look, I'm not saying I want Ron Rivera as the head coach, but I'm not sure it's really a good bet to think Ron Rivera is the top candidate for the job right now. Ron Rivera is one of the few candidates the Jets can interview, because if you're employed by an NFL team, you're not allowed to interview until the season's over. I don't know why that is for general manager candidates, because I don't see what the disruption is. The front office, if you're a GM candidate, that means you work in the front office, and front office busy season is not now. This is the quiet part of the front office season. The busy part of the front office season is like, during free agency and lead up to the draft. And even like if you're a scout, like during the college football regular season. I know we have some college football bowl games in the playoff going on, but I don't know why I can see why they don't like assistant coaches interview for head coaching jobs right now, because you're taking a guy out of his. If you're interviewing an assistant coach, he's leaving his team in the middle of formulating the game plan. That makes a little more sense to me. But regardless of my take on the rules, Jets can't interview any of the big guys yet. So this search, the point here is that the search is at its early stages. So if you're frustrated, if you're worried that you're not hearing the Jets associated with any of the big names, look, I can't guarantee you the Jets are going to be interviewing any of the big names. I can't guarantee you any of the big names will want to work for the Jets. I can't guarantee you the Jets will be able to hire one of the big names. I can't guarantee you they'll offer anybody the job. But I think it's very early in the process. And by all indications, it sounds like the Jets are going to take their time on this. It sounds like the Jets are going to cast a fairly wide net. It'll be an extensive interview process. And one other thing I'd note is that, Mike Tannenbaum, Jets' former GM, is running the search with the 33rd team. And I think back to 2009, January of 2009, after the Jets fired Eric Mangini following the 2008 season. That was a very extensive head coaching search. I think the Jets interviewed about 20 candidates or so for the head coaching job when all was said and done. They eventually settled on Rex Ryan. So if you're looking at Tannenbaum's track record, the last time he ran a search for a head coach, it was extensive. It was lengthy. Then the Jets eventually did settle on Rex Ryan. So all of this is to say that any early impressions are just those early impressions. You can have views on the caliber of certain candidates. I mean, Ron Rivera is not a guy I'd have a ton of interest in. I don't think he's I think there are some Jets fans when they heard that were treating him like he was Rich Kotite. Rivera had some decent seasons in Carolina. When Rivera had a good quarterback in Cam Newton, he had decent success. I would not be that interested in him, though. I don't even know he's a candidate I would interview. But when your pool's limited right now and you can't really interview any of the top guys, I don't think it's the end of the world to spend a little bit of time with Ron Rivera. And I don't think there's anything suggesting he's a top candidate. And again, we'll see the Jets interview GM candidates, but we're at the early stages. The main point is we are closer to the beginning than the end here. We'll start to see things pick up in earnest next week. So anybody who's interviewed at this point, don't read too much into it. Just because they're interviewing first doesn't mean that they're the preferred candidate. It just means that they're the only candidates who are allowed to interview because of the rules the NFL has. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend. I guess enjoy the game. Maybe the Jets will give us something good to watch on Sunday. We'll be back after the game to talk more Jets.